Welcome back to the Blame Game on week 2 of the group stage of Worlds. This week did its usual job of being a slap in the face, bringing the West back to reality. It was kind of our Korean overlords to give us that week 1 that we usually get, but it's time to come back down to earth. NA did better than usual, going 9-9 in group stage, but there is still a gap. The big topic this week, of course, is the fact that TSM has failed to get out of groups. The blame was spread around fairly evenly, with almost every single member of the team getting at least one highly rated comment. These comments weren't too incendiary either, though they were pretty upset. Just to jump right into it, yes, this really did seem like a complete team failure, and you can point the finger at basically anyone depending on the circumstance. For example, in the Samsung Galaxy game, you can definitely point a finger at Bjerg for getting dumpstered in lane versus Crown in a matchup that's really not that bad for Zilean. Later on, Biofrost had a shield on Karma that kept Bjergsen up and not letting the Zilean ult go off, or at the very best, could have been used to speed Zilean away after his ult doesn't proc. In the same game, Doublelift got blown up by Victor right as TSM were turning the game around and could have just gone for a relatively free Baron. Hauntzer likely tunneled on the team call saying focus Rek'Sai instead of realizing that he has a potentially game-winning play available if he flashes onto Samsung's backline. In the game versus RNG, you can criticize TSM's preparation and staff for leaving up Aurelion Sol, which you know your enemy plays and is one of the best tools to neutralizing their biggest asset in Bjergsen. The one point I'll contest just a little bit is the Jace pick. I was initially critical of it as well, but after rewatching the game, I'm more okay with it. A lot of people said that the only reason that Hauntzer was the highest damage dealing player in the game was because he was playing Jace, a poke pick, and that's kind of true, but it doesn't tell the whole story. He was actually able to do a lot of work in team fights as well. A lot of people were calling for Hauntzer to be on a tank because they didn't think he snowballed top hard enough, but I don't really think he was given a chance to. He had almost a 40 CS lead 10 minutes into the game, but the problem is his bottom side of the map lost their turrets only 8 minutes. The other team also had Aurelion Sol, which is one of the best pushers and roamers in the game. The fact that his team is able to generate no pressure around mid or bottom really cripples his ability to carry from the top lane. He managed to split push some turrets down later in the game, which helped stabilize his team's gold deficit. He also got caught off in the side lanes a couple times, but that's kind of expected given the comp that they're playing against, and he usually didn't give up an objective for it. If Hauntzer were on a tank, the same thing would have happened early game because it basically had nothing to do with the top side of the map. The only difference would be that TSM wouldn't have a big CS lead top, they wouldn't have split push turrets down the mid game, but they would have some extra peel for that relatively useless Lucian who got rolled in the early game. I think the blame's off this time. The other topic I'll touch on is CLG's draft versus Rocks. CLG drew a lot of flack for not picking or banning the Alistar away when they had the opportunities to, with fans citing the champion's high win rate and extreme playmaking potential as the reasons to do so. Let me just say I'm down with the Alistar. The pick has more carry potential than probably any other support pick right now and can be a huge threat. That said, I do think fans are tunneling on it a little bit too hard. There's a reason that Alistar is hovering around 50% pick rate. It doesn't really win any matchups, losing to both mages and melee supports in general 2v2 laning. Picking it early is usually giving up your ability to pressure 2v2 and requires jungle assistance to really take over the lane. It's obviously not horrible to take blind pick either because even in the worst case situation, you can usually max E and just wimp out the lane, but it's not really a power pick like some of the other highest pick champions we see. In Cloud9 versus SKT, we saw that just because you pick Alistar doesn't mean you're going to get those monster engages that we saw at Amada. That said, understanding the meta that you're playing in is extremely important as well. In the group that CLG was playing in, Group A, Alistar had become a pretty high priority champion. That priority wasn't as high in some other groups, with them often picking it last or not at all. If the priority of Alistar went up in the group, then CLG should have considered it. And I'm sure they did. It's well known that Bard is one of the best counters into Alistar and one of Afro's best champions. They likely wanted to pressure bottom really hard with the Caitlyn pick as well, but just failed to execute on the plan. I'd say this one is... I'd agree with someone saying, man, Afro's Bard sucked, they should have gone with Alistar, but I'm not sure I'd agree with, why would you ever leave up Alistar and give it to him? This week's unsponsored High Five Comment of the Week award goes to ANBDI. I'm usually not one for low effort, karma seeking, let's all be friends post, but I agree with the sentiment of this one. I mean, NA versus EU is hilarious for the memes it produces, but let's not go too far and poop on each other because Let's be honest, Korea is pooping on all of us. That's it for this week's episode of The Blame Game. I'm gonna be on Riot's alt stream doing player experience commentary for quarterfinals, so you can look for me there. I also released the first episode of a different series that focuses on macro game on this channel, so check it out and sub if you like it. I'm out. You see this number? You see that number? Those numbers are pretty far apart. What's going on here, boys? Hit that sub button.